30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello again. Thanks everybody for your patience. We're back here on the Angry Astronaut. I'm hoping that we have some good audio right now because we've been trying to implement some new software, did some testing with it in the during the downtime that we had. So I hope everybody is hearing me pretty well, and welcome to the broadcast. We have about 13 minutes before NASA is supposed to go live to give us the latest and perhaps either last or second to last update that we're going to get on Starliner before they finally decide what the hell they're going to do with this thing. We have reached a critical point with Starliner whereby it just can't stay docked to the ISS much longer. It's hit almost the end of its certified period that it can actually stay docked in terms of its batteries, in terms of the equipment life, and also the issues that are happening with its thrusters. These helium leaks are taking forever. And of course, they're ongoing. And as helium leaks continue, you continue to drain the helium available to the thrusters. And of course, that's an important part of any engine to help drive the propellant through the engine. So, letting it sit here and letting it remain docked to the space station is not a good thing. And we have reached a crisis moment with this spacecraft whereby leaving it there any longer is just simply not going to be a viable thing. And as we all know, trying to undock this ship in an automated fashion is impossible, or at least it was impossible. It could be that we're going to get an announcement today that Boeing and NASA were able to upload the necessary software for Starliner to carry out an automated undocking. That could be part of what their strategy is at the moment, in case they're not planning to send Butch and Suni down on the ship. But I have to say, I doubt it. I'm really beginning to feel that Boeing is going to do everything in their power to try to strong arm NASA into sending Butch and Suni back on Starliner, because they know they're through if they don't get these two astronauts back on the ship. If they have to send it back automated again for the third time, a third unmanned reentry, because NASA doesn't trust this ship to take humans back to Earth safely, not only is Boeing done as far as Starliner is concerned, Boeing is done as far as space flight is concerned for a significant amount of time. The only obligation that NASA will have to Boeing from here on out will be SLS. And even with SLS, as we all know, for those of you who watch my content on that, the NASA Office of Inspector General just unloaded a blistering report against Boeing, discussing at length and in detail all of the really awful quality control that Boeing has been demonstrating with the construction of the Block 1B SLS. Dean, thank you so much for the $5. Really appreciate that. There needs to be a full investigation into this entire shambles. Starliner should not have launched with crew on board Totally, totally agree with that. So, SLS needs to keep pushing forward at the moment. We don't yet have a human rated replacement for SLS. Starship is not there. It's not even close to there yet. It's going to be a while before Starship is able to completely replace SLS and Orion in every considerable respect. Elmar, thank you so much for your support. Really do appreciate that. Brevard County. Thanks a lot for helping me out. And by the way, any support that I'm getting tonight is all going into my journey to Cape Canaveral, because for those of you who don't know, I'm going to be covering the Crew 9 mission, the SpaceX Crew Dragon mission, where the latest crew rotation to the International Space Station. NASA invited me, or rather I applied for media accreditation and was approved for the first time ever. NASA gave the Angry Astronaut media credentials for a big event. And so now I get a behind the scenes tour, which I'll, of course, be filming and bringing to you guys. I'll be getting interviews with the powers that be behind this mission, including the astronauts. Of course, I'll be bringing all of this to you as well, and I'll be able to live stream the launch up close and personal. That also, obviously, I'll be bringing to you folks. So any support that I can get, just for the plane ticket, hotel, rental car, etc., deeply appreciated. And that's in super chats, or the details are also in the description if you'd like to support me through PayPal or Patreon. Okay, enough of that. Enough self promotion. But super excited about that. But in the meantime, yeah, this is a critical moment for Boeing. This is Boeing's last gasp. Is the best way to put this. I mean, if Boeing can somehow pull this out, if they can somehow deliver on what they say they can deliver on and drag this spacecraft back through the atmosphere and have it land safely in spite of all the issues that they have experienced, then they may still have hope. But of course, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, never mind. Oh, okay, sure. Thank you, producer. So, by the way, we've got about 7 minutes before we're going to begin the NASA broadcast, and this is just going to be an audio broadcast, from what I understand. So we'll see exactly what updates we're going to be getting. What we're hoping to get is at least an indication of what NASA's plans actually are, and it's to whether or not they're going to allow Boeing to take a shot at this. To be 100% honest, I don't want this to happen. I mean, I would love to see actually Starliner, against all odds, take these people safely back. Ideally, sure, that would be a great thing to see. But if it's not safe to do it, if it involves any unnecessary or unwarranted risks to these very talented, experienced, and just decent people, Butch and Suni, who are up on the ISS right now, it's not worth it. It is absolutely not worth it. Boeing has demonstrated time and again that their current corporate culture, that their level of expertise or lack thereof, just isn't up to the task. And they have a long ways to go before, I would say, probably a couple of decades, before they're really going to be able to drag themselves back into the competitive spaceflight arena and produce reliable products again as they once did. So until that actually happens, we don't need to be risking human lives on these ships. I am totally against that. I mean, if Boeing can honestly say, and I really don't think they can, if Boeing can honestly say that this ship can take Butch and Suni back with minimal risk to the crew, with really no greater risk than they would have ordinarily. They've done all the necessary work, prep, etc., investigation into the systems that have failed. Even if all those systems fail, right now, their redundancy systems will be sufficient in order to get the job done with minimal risk. If they can honestly say that, then yeah, by all means. But I don't think they really can. I don't think that this ship is ever going to be safe enough to be able to reliably transport human beings, especially back through the atmosphere. And, the biggest reason that I believe that is just the issues with the thrusters, these ongoing thruster problems, which, by the way, it took a lot of work on the ground at White Sands test facility with all of these thrusters to reproduce the problems that are currently happening up in space. They were eventually able to do that, but it took a long time to reproduce, these errors. The question that I have is, why didn't they do that in the first place? Why did they not test these thrusters to a degree to where they could reproduce these failures before the ship even lifted off? It's just not acceptable. So to be in this situation now with two stranded astronauts on board and a malfunctioning spacecraft locked onto the ISS without even the necessary software to carry out an automated undocking. I mean, there are so many snafus, so many things that have gone wrong in this mission. Most of it on, Boeing's side of the equation. Or, if we want to assign specific blame, it's actually Aerojet Rocketdyne. Aerojet Rocketdyne are the folks who designed these faulty thrusters. I mean, that's where the vast majority of the problems seem to exist now. The timing software and the navigational issues that came up on the first flight that went all wrong, those issues seem to be pretty thoroughly resolved. The only problems that we seem to have are with these thrusters that were built by Aerojet Rocketdyne. We're going live, guys. Here we go. Let's see what they have to say. Music at the moment, so we got to wait until this copyrighted music goes dead, and then we'll go ahead and bring you the details. Right now, yeah, that's all we have is just music. So we'll bring it live when it's something else, when it's something substantial. But yeah, according to their actual scheduling, it should be 2 minutes before we actually hear somebody talking. But we'll see. Who knows? They might get started slightly earlier. Once again, this is a media teleconference event for Starliner, the latest issues that is confronting this troubled spacecraft, and hopefully at least some indication as to what NASA's plans really are, because they are definitely running out of time. We need to know by next week at the latest as to what's going to happen, and they need to execute now. William, thank you so much. Really appreciate your support. Your first ever super chat. Thank you so much for helping out. Really, really do appreciate that. Hope everybody can. Oh, there's our super chat celebration. We have a new super chat celebration system the producer's providing for us for anybody that wants to. Oh, here we go. NASA is live.
To ask a question, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Please ensure that your line is unmuted, and please record your name and affiliation to be introduced to ask your question. The call is being recorded, and if you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Please continue to stand by for today's press conference. We will begin momentarily.
All right, so we're going back to music again. But this is going to all be happening very soon. By the way, I'm not in the current queue, the media queue. I decided to just go ahead and bring you the broadcast today rather than trying to broadcast my own questions. To be honest, I very seldom get an opportunity to ask a question anyway. Usually somebody at the other end kind of has to put you at the front of the queue in order to get that opportunity. Like, for example, Astrobotic did that for me during a press conference not that long ago. Paul Jenkins for the $5. Thank you so much for your support. Once again, so looking forward to this amazing opportunity to watch Crew Dragon lift off, to meet the astronauts who are going to be on the ISS, to meet everybody involved in that. It is a multi-day event. a really big deal. And of course, I'll be filming the whole thing and bringing you all the details. And of course, a live coverage of the launch of the Crew 9 mission, Crew Dragon, hauling another 4 astronauts up to the station, maybe, or maybe just 2 astronauts because they need to leave 2 empty spots for Butch and Suni. Hard to say. But Starliner is indeed a lemon, no question about that. Continuing to be a problem in a big way. CJ, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We need some unfiltered, non-bullshit, non-PC commentary about Starliner. Please give us your real thoughts. Well, I'll tell you, I think I've been pretty blunt about my opinions about Starliner and the time that I've been reporting on it. But lest you wonder what I think that Starliner has been a massive waste of space. NASA made an enormous mistake by not going with a human-rated Dream Chaser from Sierra Space. That is what they should have done. It made much more sense, a much more flexible spacecraft that's capable of so many more things than Starliner is capable of. A little mini space shuttle. Instead of designing 2 competing space capsules, what NASA should have done is have one company provide a reusable space capsule, that is SpaceX and Crew Dragon, and then have Sierra Space do the mini space shuttle. I think that would have been a much better way to proceed with the commercial crew program, but instead they just thought that the conservative and quote safe unquote method of doing 2 competing space capsules is the best way to go, and they were dead wrong. Here we go. NASA's live.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone, to today's press conference. At this time, you are on listen only until the question and answer portion of our call, at which time you will be prompted to press star 1. Please ensure that your line is unmuted, and please record your name and affiliation to be introduced to ask your question. The conference is being recorded, and if you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the conference over to your host, Mr. Josh Finch. Sir, you may proceed.
Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's media teleconference on NASA's Boeing crew flight test. I'm Josh Finch with NASA's Office of Communications. Leadership joining me with opening remarks on the mission, as well as to talk about NASA's overall review process for its human spaceflight missions. We have Ken Bowersock, Associate Administrator for NASA's Space Operations Mission Directorate, Russ DeLoach, Chief of NASA's Office of Safety and Mission Assurance, and NASA Chief Astronaut Joe Acaba. Although not providing opening remarks, but here to answer questions, we have Joel Montalbano, Deputy Associate Administrator for NASA's Space Operations Mission Directorate, and Emily Nelson, Chief Flight Director of NASA's Flight Operations. We'll begin with opening comments from Ken.
Hey, Josh, thanks, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. We really appreciate your interest and the time that you spend with us. I want to set expectations first. We don't have any major announcements today, but we did want to spend some time with you going through our process for how we make flight readiness decisions and to give you a little bit of status information. Our technical experts are all busy diving deeply into all the data that's been generated over the past few weeks, going through the feedback of new propulsion system experts that have been brought in, looking at planning for our return options, and preparing for some decision points that are ahead at the program control board and eventually a flight readiness review. The way it works at NASA before a normal launch, we have a lot of readiness reviews at the programs with our technical authorities, and the results of those reviews come to an agency board called the Flight Readiness Review. Typically, that's right before launch, where we bring in representatives from all of the related centers, the technical authorities, the programs, the NASA Engineering and Safety Center, flight operations. We get everybody together, we listen to the status of the mission, go through some special topics, and then we poll everybody at the end on whether or not they think we're ready to undertake the mission. At that point, typically we turn mission execution over to a flight control team for any time-critical operations, anything that can be handled with our flight rules. And we have a mission management team that we funnel all of our management inputs through to get information to the flight control team. If we have more time or an especially critical issue, we can go back and revisit some of that lower level program and organizational board process and come back to another flight readiness review. And in this case, we've got time, and it's a fairly major discussion to decide about whether or not we're going to have crew on board Starliner for return. So we're anticipating another flight readiness review meeting after the programs have had a chance to meet. The timing for those meetings, we're expecting that the data analysis will be ready for a program board middle to end of next week, and that would be ready for a flight readiness review around the end of next week, potentially beginning of the following week. We've got some flexibility there. I know everybody would like a date. We've got some working dates, but I know that we need to maintain that flexibility so that we make sure that we're ready for the meeting before we have it, right? We don't want to just come to the meeting before we've had a chance to process all the information. We've got time available before we bring Starliner home, and we want to use that time wisely. Right now, Butch and Sonny are well engaged on board the International Space Station. I know if I was in their position, I'd be really happy to be there, and I'd be happy to have the extra time. It's great to be there, enjoying the environment, eating that great space food, and being able to look out the window. So I know that they're making the best of this time, but I'm sure they're eager for a decision just like the rest of us. And when we have that, we will be sure to get together with the rest of you and share that information. And now I'd like to pass the microphone over to Russ.
Hey, thanks, Ken. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you.
All right, thanks. Hey, so as Ken said, I'm Russ Deloach. I'm the Chief of SNMA for NASA. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, sharing this information. Safety is a core value of NASA, and one way we ensure that it is incorporated into our decision-making process is through the use of what we call the Technical Authority Governance Model, and that's been something that we've been doing for over 20 years now. The agency has 3 technical authorities. I represent one, Safety and Mission Assurance. There is also the Chief Engineer and the Chief Health and Medical Officer. So we are required independent elements in key decisions within human spaceflight, including this one we are discussing today, the return of our crew and the Boeing Starliner. As the program works through the data and analysis with its provider Boeing, the tech authorities have personnel embedded in these teams, gaining insight and providing inputs throughout. Ultimately, the program will reach its conclusion and bring a recommendation forward to an agency-level review chaired by Ken, with the 3 technical authorities part of the go, no-go poll that Ken will do. And our positions will be informed by the engagement of our people throughout this effort. It is also the role of the tech authorities to ensure that views and perspectives of our diverse workforce are able to be expressed and appropriately considered. This robust exchange of viewpoints is a necessary aspect of a healthy safety culture important to the success of human spaceflight. I see that this is occurring, as it should, as we work through this issue. I've been very impressed with the NASA and Boeing teams working this. They have been at this very hard for a very long time, very dedicated to get to the right answer, whatever that might be. And I am confident that our process is moving to a good decision for the right path to get both Starliner and her crew home. And now I'll turn it over to Joe Acaba, Chief of the Crew Office, for his opening remarks.
Thanks, Russ. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your interest in our agency's crew flight test. I do want to emphasize the test flight aspect of this mission. As astronauts, we embark on missions fully aware of the various scenarios and outcomes that may become our realities. We undergo rigorous training to prepare both mentally and physically for the challenges that may arise during any given mission. This mission is a test flight, and as Butch and Sunny expressed, ahead of their launch, they knew this mission might not be perfect. Human spaceflight is inherently risky, and as astronauts, we accept that as part of the job. Right now, the agency has taken the time to ensure we are not putting the crew at a higher risk than is necessary. And as astronauts, that's always something worth waiting for. As Starliner's first flight with crew, Butch and Sunny gave the ground teams feedback and data on the spacecraft, both during the ride up and now docked to the International Space Station. That added human element continues to be extremely helpful for our teams on the ground. Butch and Sunny have also contributed to countless hours of science and research, which I know our ISS program is very thankful for. As most of you know, Butch and Sunny are very familiar with life aboard the space station. This is their third station mission for both of them. I do want to put this into perspective. If Butch and Sunny do not come home on Starliner and they are kept aboard the station, they will have about 8 months on orbit. We have done multiple successful long-duration missions, even up to a year. Those missions have given us volumes of data about the effects of long-duration spaceflight that we continue to use in space exploration. As I assign crew members to a flight and before they launch, we discuss nominal and potential off-nominal mission durations. They are always prepared. We are lucky to be in a time in human spaceflight where we have regular resupply missions, enabling the crews aboard the station to receive any extra supplies they may need, and where an 8-month mission falls within our standard long-duration mission timeframe. I've talked to Butch and Sunny a number of times throughout their stay, and they continue to be committed to the mission. They are proud to represent our nation, and they continue to show their readiness and resilience. We are proud of all of our current expedition crew aboard the International Space Station as we work through this process. We are proud of the teams on the ground, and we know our CFT crew, Butch and Sunny, will be ready to support the direction our agency chooses. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you to our speakers for your opening remarks. We'll now turn it over to the question and answer portion. As a reminder, you can press *1 if you'd like to enter the queue, and we are asking you to state your name and affiliation, and if you could keep it to one question. We can come back around for more within the hour that we have as we get through the questions, but we want to make sure we get to as many individuals as we can during the time that we have. And with that, I will turn it over to the operator for the media questions. Thanks.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. Our first question is from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, thank you. Last week you said there was an increased likelihood of using SpaceX to get Butch and Sunny back. Are the chances even greater now? And after more than 2 months of dealing with all these problems, what could you possibly learn in the next week to convince you to choose Starliner over Dragon? Thanks.
Hey, Marcia, I wouldn't say anything has really changed in the last week as far as that likelihood. We are getting new data, and it's interesting how, as time goes on, we've got new folks that, as they become aware of what's going on, they're offering inputs and expertise, and it's been very valuable. Sometimes it takes a while for that to come in, that information to come in, but we are seeing some things that are different. A lot of it's confirming what we already knew, but we are seeing some information that has expanded our understanding. So that's been really important.
Thank you. Our next question is from Bill Harwood with CBS News. Your line is open.
Thank you. I think this is for Russ DeLoach or maybe Ken. if the Starliner comes down without a crew on board, and even if it's a fully automated, successful reentry, it goes well, you get the craft back, does that qualify as a loss of mission from a mishap reporting standpoint? I was looking through the guidelines this week, and it appears that would be classified as a top-tier Type A mishap. At least that's how I read the webpage. Is that correct? And if so, what would that mean in terms of post-flight investigation, corrective action, costs, et cetera?
I'll let Russ talk the details. All I'll say is whether it's classified as a mishap or not, we will do a very in-depth analysis of the mission, right, just because it was a flight test. But as far as the technicalities of what we call that investigation, I'll pass that to Russ.
Yeah, and Bill, that's interesting you asked that, because that came up actually a couple weeks ago inside my team, and we talked to the agency mishap program manager, and as well as with the commercial crew program folks, and our conclusion was that by the program's mishap plan, if we, NASA, at this point, kind of intervene and make the call to kind of change the mission, that the crew would ride home on something other than Starliner, that we don't necessarily need to consider that a NASA mishap. As Ken said, we're still going to do all the investigation to understand, even where we got today. But right now, the view inside the NASA mishap program community is that does not necessarily mean that we have to label that a mishap. Now, a mishap could still occur later if for some reason there's some event that happens when Starliner is flying uncrewed home. But just the fact that if NASA steps in and says, hey, we now want our crew to fly home on another vehicle, that in itself shouldn't be classified as a mishap.
But taking the crew off, wouldn't that be a mission failure in this context?
I think my view is that it's really within Ken and Steve's purview to sort of define what the mission is. And if they decide to redefine it that way, I think that's something that they could consider.
Okay, thanks.
And because it's a test mission, I think we have a little more flexibility there, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Kristen Fisher with CNN. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you guys so much for holding another press conference. Really appreciate it. Two things, I believe they are for Ken. First, in previous news conferences, you all have said that Starliner, no matter what, whether or not it brings Butch and Sunny back to Earth, that it is still safe in an emergency situation. Is that still the case? And then my second question is just the timing of this decision-making in terms of last week you all said you needed to make a decision by mid-August. Now it looks like we're pushing it back to end of August. Is there a hard deadline on when you all have to make a decision by, or an updated deadline, given the fact that there are so many different constraints with time, specifically the batteries needing to be recharged and whatnot? What is that drop-dead time frame for when you all have to make this decision by? Thank you.
Hey, let's do the second question first. In this situation, we don't have a sharp cutoff, right? We can juggle things and make things work if we need to extend, but it's getting a lot harder. It's with the consumables we're using, with the need for the use of the ports for cargo missions, those types of things. We're reaching a point where that last week in August, we really should be making a call, if not sooner.
Hey, Kristen, could you repeat your first question, please?
Sure. My question was, is Starliner still cleared for Butch and Sunny to return to Earth in an emergency situation?
Yes, Starliner is still the contingency vehicle for Butch and Sunny. We've looked at that, and when you consider the low probability of exercising a contingency, we think the risk is reasonable to put Butch and Sunny on that vehicle in a contingency.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Joy Roulette with Reuters. Your line is open.
Thanks. For Ken, I just wanted to quickly follow up on your response to Marcia's question earlier. Could you kind of explain and give a little bit more detail on what you're seeing more recently that you said expanded your understanding of Starliner? Like, exactly what are we talking about there? And then is it still thrusters that you guys are mainly looking at, or are there parachute issues or any other things that might come up on the return journey that is factoring into your decision-making here? Thanks.
The main thing we're looking at is the propulsion system, and the kind of information we're getting is there's a lot of folks out there that have worked with similar thrusters and have seen similar issues, and so we've gotten feedback on what we're seeing, and a lot of it is confirming what we thought was causing the signatures that we were observing on orbit. You know, it's really tough when you don't have the actual hardware to look at, right, when it's up in space. So we brought in folks from our robotic spaceflight community at Glenn and at the Goddard Space Flight Center at JPL. They're used to analyzing propulsion systems when spacecraft are millions of miles away, and they provided some useful input to us. And then as far as the other issues, it's mostly just the prop system that we're tracking. We're always tracking a ton of issues, but I wouldn't say there are any other ones out there that are the major factor for this decision on a crewed or uncrewed return.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Michael Sheets with CNBC. Your line is open.
Hi, everybody. This is Michael Sheets, CNBC. I have a question for Russ. I was, like Bill, earlier reviewing some of the old commercial crew documents. I saw the acceptable loss of crew failure rate is 1 in 270. I believe that's still current for the commercial crew program. I know that things are changing and that you guys are getting new data in, but Russ, where is the current calculation for a loss of crew probability based off the information that you have right now? Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, to the best of my knowledge, that analysis has not been updated, as part of this mission operation.
So are you saying that you don't know what it is? I'm a little bit unclear about your answer.
Yeah, it takes a long time to do that analysis, right? So it's not something that we typically adjust real time. So I wouldn't expect that from Russ's team. Russ, anything else you wanted to add?
I was just going to add, that the way that requirement was established, it was really a design certification requirement. So it was all about getting it established as part of design certification, and I am unaware of any requirement to update it through the course of mission operation. So yeah, the answer is it's not actively being updated as the operation is commencing.
Thank you. Our next question is from Micah Maidenberg with the Wall Street Journal. Your line is open.
Thank you. This is for perhaps Joe Acaba. Has Butch and Sonny specifically been asked about whether they would do the nominal Starliner return, given the data that has been collected and the understanding of risk? If they have, what was their response, and how does that response weigh in with the broader decision-making at NASA about whether to go with Starliner or Crew Dragon? And if they haven't been asked, will they be asked at some point? Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so I've spoken, like I said, quite a bit with Butch and Sonny. They are receiving a lot of information that we are reviewing here on the ground. I do ask for their opinion, but when I talk to them, they are relying on us on the ground to analyze the data and to come up with a decision. And they will do what we ask them to do, and that's their job as astronauts.
Producer, let's cut
Okay,
this.
so they've never stated a preference or view about the nominal return plan?
Aaron?
Or?
Yeah, I would just say this is not really a preference thing. They are going to wait for us to analyze the data and to come up with a decision. And again, they will do what we ask them to do.
Thanks.
Thank you. Our next question is from Lauren Grush with Bloomberg. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you so much. During the last press conference, you mentioned you had pulled in propulsion experts from various NASA centers to help. I'm curious if you can just kind of illustrate how many people and teams you have working on this decision right now.
Well, we basically set up a separate team led by the head of engineering at Johnson Space Center. And I'd say that team was roughly 10 people. There were 6 folks from the centers that I mentioned earlier that do robotic space flight, plus specialists from Marshall, Johnson Space Center, Kennedy Space Center. So we brought in a bunch of folks from around the agency and took sort of a focused look, led by a different person, to come up with whatever conclusions they could from looking at the data. But they didn't generate new data, right? They looked at our existing data.
Thank you. Our next question is from Kenneth Chang with the New York Times. Your line is open.
Great, thank you. This is for Mr. Deloach and Mr. Akaba, probably for Ken Bowersox too. Could you talk about how you think about acceptable risk when, as Joe said, everything astronauts do in space is inherently risky?
Producer,
I know
are you
this is
there?
complicated because of the uncertainties and you haven't calculated numbers for this mission.
Just go ahead and cut this,
but
please.
if you thought Starliner was likely to fail during return, you would have
Yes.
made your decision and
No,
be well
don't
into the Crew
just
Dragon
cut
program.
NASA, please.
I suspect even the odds.
Guys, I want to apologize, but at the same time, I think we all knew where that was heading. Precisely nowhere. I think that we got some questions that it revealed a little bit at the start there. I would say that it sounds like NASA is trying to prepare us for the eventuality to where Butch and Suni are going to stay put on ISS, at least until next year. That seems to be the current plan, and that seems to be the direction that they're heading in. Obviously, they're not giving us a solid decision on this, but I think I speak for just about everybody who's watching this right now as to how ridiculous all of this is starting to become. Okay, sure, it's a test flight. I get that. But we had test flights going on with this spacecraft when I started my channel. The first episode that I ever created for the Angry Astronaut was criticizing Starliner after it got lost in orbit, having fired its thrusters in the wrong direction and all that. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy if you consider the amount of time that this spacecraft has been in a test mode, and it is not acceptable for Starliner to be at the point that it is now, still struggling through these ridiculous problems when ISS is less than 10 years away from being decommissioned. How is this spacecraft supposed to be a reliable backup for Crew Dragon, an alternative commercial crew spacecraft, if it's running into these kinds of issues this late in the development process? My God, this thing has been in development for almost a decade and a half. I mean, at what point do we just go ahead and call it a day with this? And I'm pretty certain that even though Boeing realizes that their future in space flight is probably going to be axed for quite a long time if Starliner fails to take Butch and Suni back at this point, financially, they want this to be over with too. They are losing so much money on Starliner. So much money. Because remember, it's a fixed price contract. They can't charge the taxpayers any more money than they already have. So any additional expenditures that they make on this spacecraft continues to come out of their pocket and out of their budget, and they just can't afford to keep doing this. Boeing, from a financial standpoint, wants this to be over with. And I really think that for everybody's good, once they finally get this spacecraft back in whatever shape it happens to return in, this needs to be the end of the program overall. I really don't see how there's a path for Starliner ahead. Consider the number of years that it took us just to get to this point, let alone the number of years that it would take to fix whatever issues came up with Starliner during this flight and to actually try again, given the limited amount of time that remains between now and when ISS will be decommissioned. It makes no sense. It's just a waste of time, effort, and resources. It has been for a considerable amount of time. So thanks very much for tuning in. I will continue to keep you guys updated on everything. Thanks so much for your support, by the way, for my efforts to get to the Crew 9 mission next month and to cover all of that, which is likely to be a much more exciting and positive experience. I can't wait to bring you all of those details. So thanks very much. Check the description for ways to support that future content coming. Thanks again so much for tuning in today. And as always, stay angry about space.